Welcome to Inspirational Leadership, and we're up to part 3 of self-care, leaders' self-care. And we've been talking about the tension of leadership and how that causes stress. And one of our problems is that we think that stress is a kind of modern disease, something that happens now. We have all this technology. Stress has always been around, a part of human nature. Take, for instance, some stories from the Bible. I want to just look at 2 to remind you that stress, anxiety and depression have always been a part of the human condition and always been a subset of what it is to lead. Take a look at Elijah and the story of 1 Kings and in chapter 18 and 19. You want to read the whole story, just read chapter 18 and 19 of 1 Kings. He's at Mount Carmel. He's before 450 prophets of Baal. There's a sort of showdown between them. You know that they set up altars. The prophets can't get the altars lit. The power of God does so. He has this amazing victory. He goes and prays after years of drought, and the drought is broken. He runs back to Jezreel ahead of the king's chariot. He's just so fired up, and he gets back, and Jezebel, the queen, says to him, "I'm going to make you like the prophets that you've just killed." And he's broken. He goes in the desert, and he's just completely busted. And he basically prays to God. God says, he meets him the first time, he said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I want to die. I'm the last one, I want to die." And then he goes to Mount Horeb. God sends him onto Mount Horeb, and then you remember the story about the fire and the earthquake, and God's not in any of those, but God's in the still small voice, and God says to him, "So why are you here?" And he says, "Well, I'm the only one left." And interesting, God doesn't actually say when he interacts with Elijah, "You're failing, you're not praying enough, you're not spiritual enough, why are you depressed, this is a terrible thing." He basically says, "There's other people, get back in the game." Elijah was basically overcome by the stress and pressure and just basically got depressed. And God meets him in that moment. But it's not just the kind of radical Old Testament prophets. Take Paul, who kind of opens his heart in several cases, letters that he writes in the New Testament. Hear what he says at 2 Corinthians, right at the beginning, when he's writing to the church at Corinth. He says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the hardship we suffered in the province of Asia." He goes on to say, "We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even for life." Now, I don't think Paul's just saying despaired even for physical life. And if you go into chapter 4, he talks about being hard pressed on every side. Depression and anxiety and stress overwhelming leaders is a biblical problem, and it's a problem now. The action point today: do you need to rethink your attitude to depression and anxiety? And do you think the side effects may be beginning to impact you? Don't ignore them. They're important issues.